What's supposed to do? Stop!
A dog seemed unusually restless, eager to show something to its owner. It barked relentlessly, pointing towards something the owner couldn't quite make out. Both the man and his loyal dog were stranded in a desolate, icy landscape, far from any sign of life. Confused but curious, the owner, noticing the dog's persistent and deliberate barking toward a specific direction, began cautiously walking toward the area the dog had been fixated on. As he drew nearer to the mysterious object half buried in the snow, a sense of unease swept over him. Something felt off. Despite his growing suspicions, curiosity pushed him forward. When he finally reached the box and lifted its lid, what he saw froze his blood far colder than the biting air ever could. Meanwhile, back in the city, a middle-aged man named Detective Breslin was preparing for work. He was a seasoned officer, often involved in the most complex cases. Just as he was about to leave for the station, he received a phone call. There had been a crime reported in a remote, frozen landscape. The incident demanded immediate attention. Breslin had 2 sons. The elder, Steve, sat at the kitchen table, reading a newspaper with a distant, vacant expression. As Breslin gathered his coat, he bid farewell to his son, though Steve seemed to ignore him entirely. Soon after, Breslin arrived at the same icy crime scene where the dog had been barking earlier. As he stepped out of his vehicle, a fellow officer approached and began briefing him, guiding him through the unsettling surroundings. The officer explained that the scene was deeply disturbing and, more significantly, unusual. No body had been found, which puzzled everyone involved. This strange lack of a corpse only deepened the eeriness of the case. As they continued investigating, Breslin spotted a strange table set up on the icy surface, something that clearly didn't belong there. It appeared to be prepared for some kind of grim ritual. When he lifted the cover, he was horrified to find human teeth carefully arranged on the plate. The officer accompanying him noted that Breslin had been called specifically due to his experience handling bizarre and horrific crimes. Back at the police station, the officer shared that the suspected victim was believed to be a man around 30 years old, and evidence such as cigarette remains suggested he was a smoker. Breslin and his team were still without confirmation on whether the man was alive or had been murdered. That night, after a long day, Breslin returned home to find his children asleep, having waited for him. The next morning, as he attended prayers at church with his kids, his phone rang with an urgent call. A new crime had been discovered at a residential home, even more horrifying than the previous one. A woman had been brutally tortured and hanged on meat hooks, with the phrase, "Come and see," scrawled around the crime scene. Forensic expert Jack confirmed she had been dead for 12 hours, but it was unclear how long she had suffered. Officer Jim added that the murderer had likely recorded the act, as shoe prints and a tripod were found at the scene. Breslin and Jim visited the victim's children. Jim revealed that the victim, a mother, had 3 children, including an adopted daughter named Christy. Breslin later learned from Jack that the woman was pregnant, and the murderer had stolen the unborn child after cutting open her stomach. Meanwhile, Breslin's son Steve waited at school. When Breslin finally arrived to pick him up, he tried to make it up to him, but once again, work interfered, and their plans were canceled. Frustrated, Breslin rushed back to work, where he found another brutal murder. The victim, a teacher named Stephen, had been murdered in the same horrifying manner. Jim informed Breslin that the investigation was focusing on the tools used in the killings, including the custom hooks. Later that night, Breslin visited a tattoo parlor and discovered that the hooks had been commissioned by a masked man who paid a significant amount for the work. The next morning, Breslin sat down with Kristen and spoke to her gently. He told her that the moment she had called him, he had dropped everything, his work, his responsibilities, and rushed straight to her. Christy, tears in her eyes, began to speak. She explained that her mother had once believed she could never have children of her own, which was why she had adopted Kristen. But fate had other plans. Her mother eventually gave birth to 2 biological children. Suddenly, without warning, Kristen hugged Breslin tightly and whispered in his ear, asking him to forgive her. The gesture confused Breslin. His eyes searched her face as he asked, "Forgive you for what, Christy?" In response, Kristen slowly pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was something resembling raw meat. Breslin's heart raced. Christy, her smile dark and spreading across her face, revealed the horrifying truth. It was her adoptive mother's unborn child. She looked directly at Breslin and, with eerie calmness, confessed that she had removed the baby from her mother's stomach herself. Her words were chilling. The wicked smile on her face made Breslin's blood run cold. He was shaken to his core by Christie's terrifying revelation. After this shocking confession, Kristen was taken into custody. The formal interrogation began. Christy, now calm, started to reveal fragments of her twisted mind. She admitted that she had always hated her adoptive father. That hatred, she claimed, was why she killed her mother. This didn't make sense to Breslin, and he stared at her, baffled. Kristen continued, saying that she had wanted to hurt her father emotionally because he loved his wife deeply. Her intent was to destroy what he cherished most. Breslin was horrified by her words. That night, Breslin and Officer Jim searched Christie's room thoroughly. In a hidden drawer, they found a photo album and a DVD. They played the DVD together, only to witness the unthinkable. Footage of Kristen torturing and eventually killing her mother. The video was beyond disturbing. After that, they examined the photos in the album. What they found was even more gut-wrenching. The images clearly showed Christie's father sexually assaulting her. The next day, Breslin resumed the interrogation. He asked Kristen who else was involved with her, how many people were in her group, who had she killed, and how large was their network. Kristen calmly replied that there were 4 core members, but many more individuals were loosely connected. She refused to give any more details, simply saying she couldn't say anything further. Frustrated and disturbed, Breslin left the room. At the same time, in a nearby cafe, a young man named Paul met his older brother, Tom. As they sat across from each other, Paul smiled and said he had made extra coffee for his brother. He affectionately addressed Tom as brother while handing over the drink. After a few sips, Tom started feeling uneasy. He told Paul that he wasn't feeling well and asked him to help him get home. Paul agreed. As the brothers walked through a dim, isolated alleyway, Tom's body suddenly went limp. The coffee had done something to him. He lost consciousness and collapsed. When Tom eventually regained consciousness, he found himself in a horrifying situation. He was hanging mid-air in an abandoned warehouse, suspended by sharp meat hooks that had pierced through his flesh. The pain was unbearable. He screamed and cried, his voice echoing through the empty space. From the shadows, Paul slowly stepped into view and sat down on a chair in front of Tom. With a blank expression, he told his brother that real pain wouldn't come from physical suffering, but from watching someone you love die before your eyes. And then, in a shocking act, Paul began torturing himself. Tom's screams intensified as he witnessed his brother mutilate his own body. The following morning, Breslin stood in front of yet another gruesome crime scene. Paul's lifeless body was found, while Tom was discovered still alive, but clearly in deep psychological trauma. During interrogation, Tom, still trembling, explained the events to Breslin. He said his younger brother had taken his own life because he believed his family had been neglecting him. Paul wanted Tom to live with the unbearable guilt of not being there for him. Paul had deliberately planned to die in front of his brother, hoping that the emotional scars would haunt him forever. The officer, examining Paul's body, confirmed the method of his death. Forensic expert Jack told Breslin that Paul had used an electric saw to cut into his own chest and remove his heart. It was another act of self-inflicted brutality, done with the sole purpose of inflicting psychological pain. Immediately after, Breslin returned to Christie. He stood in front of her and said, "Today, one of the other horsemen has killed himself, just like you, to torture others." Christie, unshaken, smiled as Breslin continued, "Now I understand. The horsemen can give their lives to torment others, and they can take lives just the same." He pleaded with Kristen to tell him the names of the remaining 2 horsemen, so he could stop this madness. But Kristen only laughed. She said, "Today there may be 4 of us, but countless others are connected to our cause. We will show the world what real pain is. Even your entire police force cannot stop us." Hearing her words, Breslin left the room, unable to say another word. Later, while reviewing the case files with Jim and Jack, something suddenly clicked in Breslin's mind. He realized something crucial. He hadn't been assigned to this case by coincidence. He was chosen. The horsemen had orchestrated the entire series of events just to involve him. The first crime scene had been staged specifically for him to find. The message was clear. They were coming for him and his family. Panic gripped him. Breslin ran out and rushed straight to his house. As he entered, his eyes scanned the room, and he noticed something unusual. One of the rooms had been painted completely white. On the wall there was a drawing of a theater, and scrawled beneath it were the haunting words, "Come and see." Realizing the threat, Breslin immediately rushed toward the nearby theater. As soon as he entered the building, someone appeared from the shadows and injected him with a sedative. Within seconds, he lost consciousness. When Breslin slowly woke up, He found himself tied to a chair in the middle of the old theater. Thick chains bound him, and directly in front of him was a horrifying sight. His son Steve was hanging midair, suspended by hooks just like the other victims. Breslin's heart broke. He shouted, begging for help, trying everything to free himself. Tears streamed down his face as he called out, "Don't be afraid, son. I won't let anything happen to you." Steve, barely able to speak, looked down at his father and said, "You have to kill me, Dad. Look at the gun on the floor." Breslin was devastated. He struggled violently, trying to break free. Then, Steve's voice grew more resolute. "You have to do it, Dad. There are not just 4 horsemen. There are millions. All the young ones like me whose families ignore them. They are watching us right now." Breslin, determined, shouted that he would save his son no matter what. But Steve continued, "I'm already one of them, Dad. Just like Kristen and Paul. You never paid attention to me. You only ever loved your job. Every horseman once loved their family, but money and work created distance." Steve began to faint. Seeing this, Breslin reached for the gun and fired multiple rounds at the chain suspending Steve. Finally, Steve fell to the ground, and Breslin ran to catch him. Holding his son in his arms, he cried and said, "From today onward, my life will belong to my family. I love you more than anything in this world." Steve, moved by his father's words, broke into tears. In that moment, Breslin realized the deep distance that had grown between him and his son. A distance that had nearly destroyed them both. From that day forward, Breslin vowed to give his full attention and love to his children, and never again let them feel alone. And to not feel alone, I recommend you hop on one of my recaps next. Just click the recommendations on the right and continue your entertainment. Don't forget to subscribe and drop a like. It supports my channel a lot. As always, grab your popcorn, enjoy yourself, and see you soon, my friend.